everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome. My name is Joyce Raimondo. I'm the education coordinator at the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center. We're a national landmark located in East Hampton, New York, about 100 miles east of New York City. Today, we are very fortunate to have a special guest speaker, Chris Lucore, who is both an artist as well as a gallery owner. And his gallery is located in Montauk. And he's going to tell us about his work, both as an artist and his work in the gallery. And we'll leave some time at the end for question and answer. So this session is being recorded. Do you want to say a quick hello, Chris?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to listen to my talk. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Joyce.
We're excited to have you, Chris. So before we get started with Chris's talk, I just want to tell you a little bit about how we connected and what this is all about. So I am in the Barn studio of Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner, and I'm going to take you for a little walkthrough and tell you very briefly a little bit about Pollock's work and how Chris's work relates to Jackson Pollock, and how I actually came to know Chris as a child when he was in our drip painting workshops, okay? So let's take a little walk through the Barn studio. I'm putting on these slippers because you can walk right on the floor of Jackson Pollock when you come here. Now, this is the home of two of the great abstract expressionist artists, Pollock and Krasner. And many of the artists in this area, called the Springs, East Hampton, were working here in the 1940s and 50s, forging a new way of creating art. It was very physical. It was like a physical release of energy, right? Pollock says it's energy made visible. And this at the time was groundbreaking, right? It was a new language of art, 100% abstract. Now, all of these abstract artists had their own unique way of painting, and de Kooning and Elaine and Bill de Kooning, they actually continued to paint the figure, but all of the other artists were 100% abstract artists. So I'm just going to give a little quick walkthrough. Here is the now famous Barn studio, and Pollock and Lee didn't work in here together. Pollock worked in here, and then later on, after he died in 1956, a year later, Lee came in here and used the studio. The fun part about coming here, of course, is seeing the drip painted floor. So this is not a work of art. This is just where the accidental spills and splatters landed. Pollock, like Chris, who we're going to hear from today, he put the canvas on the floor. He worked from all four sides. There was no top, there was no bottom. And he's letting the paint drip from sticks. And of course, gravity pulls the paint down. And Chris has his own 100% unique way of working with the drip painting technique, okay? Very different than Pollock, but there's an obvious correlation. So Pollock also is using unusual materials. He's using house paint instead of art paint. He's using industrial materials. Pollock learned about this idea from Siqueiros, the Mexican muralist who taught a workshop in New York City. And Siqueiros encouraged his students, the artists in the workshop, to be experimental, right? To use all sorts of materials that artists wouldn't normally use. So here, Pollock, you could see his cans of paint, house paint, basters, and he's even using the stick to stir paint as an implement where the paint drips off from the stick, or the brush he's using more like a stick. He's not even actually touching the painting. Now, Pollock, like Chris, was always trying new things, right? Always coming up with new ways of painting. So at times, Pollock actually would cut up his drip painting and reconfigure them. he has a painting out of the web where you can see these figures are cut out of the drip painting, and then that image is laid on top of another canvas, okay? So Lee Krasner, after Pollock's death, as I said, comes into the studio, but she doesn't paint on the floor like Pollock. She paints on the wall, and here we have our ghost marks up here. You see them? That's what we call them. This is where her canvases were hung, okay? I didn't mean paint on the wall. Her canvases were on the wall. Now, how is it that if Lee was in here until her death painting, where are her marks on the floor? Well, this floor was actually covered with boards. And it wasn't until years later that this became a museum in 1987. This shows the conservators taking off those floorboards to discover Pollock's drip painted floor underneath, okay? So Pollock and Krasner had actually laid those boards down when they renovated and winterized the studio. So you'll see in different photos that the floor looks relatively clean. Now, we have many education programs that take place actually at the site. And for 20 years, I've been doing what's called our family drip painting workshops, where during the summer, families gather with their children and we go on a tour, and then afterwards, everybody makes their own drip painting. So I ran into Chris's mother at an art opening, and she said, I just want to thank you so much because today my son's an artist and he's got a gallery, and she was very proud. And she said, and we originally came to your drip painting. I'm not taking credit for Chris's success by any means, but I'll take credit for this. That early education is so important for children, to have those creative experiences, to be able to play with paint, to have that encouragement from their parents or their teachers to pursue a career in the arts. This is getting lost in our society right now, at least in New York. A lot of times when children go through the public education system, they're more encouraged to go into math and science and things like that, to think more analytically, okay? And of course, the arts are so vibrant, and Chris is a great example of how you can forge ahead and have a career in the arts as well. So I am so thrilled to hear about Chris's work. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Lucore, who right now is located in Montauk, which is about, it's the last town on Long Island. It's about approximately a half-hour drive from the Pollock Krasner house, okay? So it's all yours, Chris.
Well, thank you so much, Joyce. And yeah, like those experiences with the early experiences and access to art, those things really do shine through. And so I'm going to share my screen. I've got a little presentation prepared. So yeah, my name's Chris. I'm here to talk about a little bit about myself first, and then my work, and then I'll round things off by talking about the gallery. So who am I? I am an artist, an owner and curator here at the Lucore Art Gallery in Montauk. So yeah, as Joyce said, Montauk is the last town on Long Island at the very end. And the Lucore Art is located like 2 stores up from the post office, right across from a little boutique called Nebe Montauk. So I was educated upstate New York at Hobart and William Smith colleges, where I graduated with a double major in studio art and chemistry, because I couldn't choose between chemistry and analytical or studio art, so I went with both. And I was born in the Midwest in Springfield, Illinois, and I sort of grew up coming back and forth between Springfield and Montauk, and now I'm in Montauk full-time with the Lucore Art. So I graduated from college in 2022 into a pretty wild year for all of us with the pandemic. And at that same time, I had some personal health complications. I was driving through East Hampton actually and had a seizure and crashed my car. And luckily I was fine and I didn't hurt anybody else. But for the rest of the year, I was kind of at home figuring out this whole epilepsy diagnosis. And then I dived right into opening the Lucore Art in May of 2021. So things were starting to turn up with that. So onto some of my interests and inspirations. One of the really major inspirations that drives the work that I do is I'm amazed with how infinitely complex things can be contained within finite systems. So a quick example of that is like life on Earth, or everything is here contained on one big sphere. And so this sort of led me to making paint sheets, where I'll give a quick example, and I'll talk more about this later. But how this relates to that is I sort of think of it as an area where infinitely complex patterns can happen, and then I cut it to be contained within a circle or a rectangle. So, and onto some inspirations. I mean, of course, the Pollock Krasner house and that young experience there, and working with the Montauk Art Association, who's been a great partner since I opened the gallery, and some of my other East End artist friends who I've worked with while I'm here, like Anne Raymond and Haim Mizrahi, George Olson, Donna Corby, Chris Kelly, and then other East End artists that really inspire me, like Dan Christensen. And of course, all the friends that I've met here at the gallery. So what do I paint? Quickly, here's some examples on the right of the screen. There's like 8 of my paintings jammed together. So I really like space stuff. I'm inspired by all the photos that have been coming back from the James Webb Space Telescope. And I use these paint sheets that I make to build exoplanets and moons, stars, and black holes and galaxies. And my focus when I'm painting is really on the process. Like each part of my process, I have like a whole different paint mix for, and I really dive into each part. And so I live for that heavy contrast and loud colors. And I like creating really heavily textured backgrounds as well that make you just want to run up to the piece and touch it. Not that we should, but it's fun. So like I said, with my painting, I use all acrylics for the most part, and some latex paint products because they can kind of work, they can work together sometimes. And so if I was to break down my compositions, I have like 4 main parts. So I have my main shapes, my outlines, my secondary outlines, which hold everything down, and then the backgrounds, which are those heavily textured areas. And so the products I use when I'm making these parts, I use a lot of golden heavy body acrylics because you can dilute them a lot and they're still very strong. And for background textures, I use molding paste and heavy gloss a lot because it can really cake on that texture. And then in the liquid paint mix, I use a lot of Elmer's glue because it really adds plastic, and it's what makes the sheets able to like stay just together by themselves. It's quite literally the glue that holds everything together. And then also Floetrol, which is a leveling agent for latex paint, which works to help get like a consistent layer on the sheet so there's not high spots and low spots, and water to thin the paint out more so you can really sort of throw it around and work with the dripping aspect of it. So diving back into those here's a little video of it's a quick time lapse of me mixing the liquid paint. So first the acrylic goes into the water and you get that pretty even, and then add in the glue, and then little bits of Floetrol and water to get it to the right consistency. And so onto the main shapes. I'll play this video while I'm talking about that. So this is the liquid paint laid out in a puddle, and then I do different things to sort of agitate the paint. So either using a brush or like I have a pencil in this video, dragging lines through it. And then I also like to use gravity a lot. So I generally work flat on the ground, and then I like to pick it up and sort of put some of like letting the paint flow around gives it that more natural flowy look. So I like to incorporate gravity when I can. But really, however you do the mix is sort of what determines what the final paint sheet looks like. Like a mix that's all glue will be sort of a more marbled pattern. When you start bringing in things like Floetrol, you get like you can get these bubbles and cells to start happening. So, I mean, that's where the experimentation comes in, is just like throwing new things in your mix and like using different ratios of the stuff. And then, so yeah, those puddles, I do them on plastic or metal sheets. So then in 3 days when they're dry, they just peel right up and I can cut into them. And then I take them, and when I have a piece that I really like, so like something that screams planet to me or asteroid, I'll take it and I'll glue it onto the canvas. And then to sort of cover up the edges, the next piece of the composition is the outline. And so the mix here is acrylic paint and that extra heavy gel, because it really gives me like something I can work with. And so then I'll either pack like one color or multiple colors into a plastic bag and cut off the corners. And I like using it like cake icing. And so here in the photo, you can see this blue and white and black twisted outline. That's from like packing 5 different colors into the bag and then doing the slow twist as while it goes around. So, but you got to pack carefully to make sure there's no air bubbles. And it always takes a little adjusting at the end to make sure it looks right. And then after that, I do another mix of acrylic paint and Elmer's glue with just no water. And I put it in a glue bottle. And here in this photo, you can see the black lines on either side of the outlines. Those are the secondary outline. And so the purpose of that is to seal it down to the canvas. And it kind of works like a welding line just to hold everything together. And it's another opportunity to add contrast. So like if the line is very bright and colorful, maybe I'll go with a black secondary outline, or, you know, if the outline is black, I'll go with a shiny pearlescent or a white. So, but it's an opportunity to add contrast, and it really has the function of sort of holding that line down and cleaning up the outlines. And so finally, I guess the last part would be the background. And in the backgrounds, I really like to set off the smooth surface of the paint sheets with like a heavily textured background. So you can see I've got 4 examples of my backgrounds. On the right here, I either like to do like square brushes or like big slashes, but I like to cake a lot of medium on there. So it's got some feel to it. And I like to include like iridescent or pearlescent pigments in the background, because I think about the paint sheets as like gemstones, and these are sort of the settings that hold the gemstones in place. So I like to go a little metallic sometimes. And those backgrounds happen in 3 layers. First, it's just the molding paste to get that pattern down. And then afterwards, it's an acrylic layer to establish a color. Normally I do white or black. And then the final layer is the gel, and it reinforces that texture. And that's also where I bring in some pearlescence and some iridescence. So here is just an example of a triptych that I have here in the gallery. This is Blue Moon, so you can kind of see all those pieces working together with the big blue paint sheets, my exoplanets, and their outlines that go around and hold them in place. And then the background is kind of like a pearlescent shine to it. And so here's where I do all this. My studio is right here in the Lucore Art. And so we opened the Lucore Art of May 2021. And we've been running until present day. And so we've done 18 amazing shows since we opened, and we're going to do another 12 this year in 2023. Our shows are generally 3 weeks on average, and we have a reception on the first or second Saturday to really kind of kick things off. The best place to find updated information on our shows and when our receptions are is on Instagram, just at the Lucore Art. And yeah, so I mean, it's been an amazing opportunity. I get to work directly with the artists to curate the shows. And then while the shows are open, I'm in the gallery working on my own art. So you can come in and talk to me about either the show or whatever I've got on the table at the time. And so just to wrap up my talk, I just wanted to do a quick thank you to all the artists that showed with me in 2022. Jim Levinson, Chris Kelly, Steve Lotion, Haim Mizrahi, Lori Campbell, James Katsipis, Ann Raymond, the Wednesday group out here in Long Island. They paint plein air. Sophie Smith and John Tuttle, Marilyn Church and Liz Sloan, and all the 50 artists that helped me round off the year with the holiday show. So really thank you for making 2022 special. And I hope to see you again in 2023. So thank you so much for letting me give my talk, Joyce, and if I can answer any questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think you left off inadvertently Carl off the list, the last show.
You're right. Oh my God, thank you so much to Carl as well. And thank you for catching that.
No, no, it's okay. It's okay. You did a great job. So big round of applause for your presentation. That was so well executed. And I'm sure we have some questions from our audience. And Teresa Lawless says, great talk, Chris. So does anybody have any questions? You can put them in the chat. With the gallery, how do you, yeah, well, Teresa Myers, it's a similar, what kinds of artists do you feature at the gallery? How do you make choices with so many wonderful artists?
So it is quite difficult to do that. I like to try and do a little bit of everything. Like I mainly work with local artists here in Montauk or Long Island. Basically last year it was all people that I've connected with while being here at the gallery. So definitely I try to really bounce around the theme though. Like just because my work is what my work looks like, I don't necessarily want that to have any effect on the other work that I show. I'm sort of just inspired by people who are passionate about their ideas. And so when I connect with somebody who I think I can work with, we start figuring things out.
Mhm. Is it ever tricky, if you don't mind me asking, like, is it ever tricky? Like, are you afraid, like, oh, because it's such a small community, like you're gonna hurt somebody's feelings, or how do you deal with that? Like, do you ever deal with that type of thing?
Well, I feel like certainly I'm worried that I can't give everybody opportunities. I mean, there's only so many slots for shows in the year, but I mean, I think it just comes down to being open to looking and talking at other people's art and being encouraging. And also, even though a lot of the shows I do are single artist shows, I think having larger invitational shows is sort of a way to connect with a larger part of the community and get more artists in the building. So I've been working more with that as well.
And you did such a good job with the holiday show, bringing all the artists together to show their work, sell their work, and have a party. It was a lot
Yeah,
of fun
yeah, that
also.
was a
And a
lot of
lot of
fun.
people sold their work. It was wonderful.
Mhm.
So let's see, we have some really good questions about, one is a general questions about the mess. So like Teresa Lawless says, do you ever work messy? Your space looks so neat. So how do you control the mess? Tips for us?
The mess, I try to have an allotted space that is allowed to get messy. So like when I'm doing the drip paintings, I'll like, I'll work, I have a big here, I'm gonna just like show you. This is one that I was just working on this morning. So I have this big plexiglass sheet on the floor, right? And when I'm working with the liquid paint, the goal is just to contain all the paint to that sheet. And so there's places where paint can be and places where paint can't be. And if it gets where it shouldn't be, it has to be wiped up immediately. And so it's just sort of staying on top of that and, allowing yourself to get messy, but like channeling it to a useful space.
Well, that's a good point. And Pollock, even though his floor was super messy and he didn't have to worry about that in the barn, he if you actually look at his canvases, all those drips are done very methodically, and they're contained within that rectangle. You can usually see right around the edge of the rectangle, there's a little empty space. So it's like that energy is contained,
Mhm.
which is really very skillful to work with such a fluid material. And yet at the same time, do you have a sense of control when you work, or is how much is random, how much is control? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the sense of control is sort of what pushed me to working with the paint sheets. Because like I was saying, how I was interested in putting really complex things within simple shapes and everything. When I started, what I would do is I would make the outline first on the canvas, the really thick outline with the paint bag. And then I would try and pour liquid paint directly into the space. And that came with sort of varying levels of success. Like sometimes it would work out and I would get what I wanted in the shape, but a lot of times it would like look good for a second and then it would settle, it would sort of like settle not the way I wanted it. So being able to like pre-make paint sheets material, I can then like zoom in on any specific spot that I want now that it's dry. Working with it after it's dry lets me sort of really pick and choose carefully the pieces that I want to use in the end of the day. So I think it's definitely all a battle with the medium to try and have control over what's going on, especially when with liquid paint. I mean, the factors, just like what you mix into the bottle, can have such a big impact on what you've got going with the drip and the puddle.
Mhm. And Nicholas says, which is related to what you're just speaking about, do you have any fun or funny stories of experiments that didn't work?
I mean, yeah, certainly there's uh probably the funniest stories that I have are just in like the collision of gallery space and studio space together. Like I've had experiments that have been like this, you know, where it's on the plexiglass sheet on the floor, and so it'll be a wet puddle of paint there, and now someone has walked in to like look at the stuff on the walls, and they're sort of spaced out, and then they'll just walk straight into the puddle, and so I have to like sit them down and wash paint out of their shoes. So I mean, that you could call that an experiment that didn't work for sure, but
That's hilarious.
so, but I mean, when they don't work out, it's sort of just like the sheet doesn't hold together, or it's like it looks great and then I try to peel it up and, you know, it rips in half. So like happens. But that's where the glue helps. It really helps sort of solidify things and hold things together. Like this stuff is also, it can be very temperature dependent as well. So if the sheets are thinner and they've been made with more Floetrol and more water, if it gets too cold, they can snap. So in the winter, I tend to use even more glue because it keeps the sheets pliable in the colder temperatures.
You know, Chris, it's interesting because I just randomly mentioned the word science, and I didn't mean to imply that science is, first off, science is not all left brain, nor is it not related to art. But you seem to have really blended your interest in science with art in a really nice way. Any thoughts on that when you're working? Do you think about how do you relate science? And maybe you already answered it, but do you want to go further with that in any way?
Um, I would just say, I don't know, I feel like chemistry informs my process a little bit, certainly. Like lab technique, I think maybe that's one thing that might help with being clean. I mean, when you're working in a chemistry lab, you have to prepare all of your solutions ahead of time and you can't be spilling stuff everywhere. These things are, you know, chemicals and caustic solutions. So you really gotta like keep everything tight. And so that, I think maybe that informs some of what I do when I'm in the studio and just keeping things neat. And definitely like in a lab, the first thing you do is you prepare all your solutions for then whatever you're gonna do. So I feel like for my paintings, it's the same way. The first thing I have to do is mix up all my paints for each step, whether it's acrylic with the glue or acrylic with the gel or whatever the mix is. That's the first thing that happens, is getting the solutions together. So
Well, thank you. And thank you for sharing your process with us. So let's see. And Tabitha says, very cool piece. Teresa Myers says, your painting process looks similar to paper marbling. Were you inspired by paper marbling?
um I don't know exactly about the process of paper marbling, but I'm definitely going for marble textures with a lot of the stuff I've been doing recently with the glue. And like I've been inspired by you know, all types of stuff that I see on Instagram. And like, what was that thing they were doing? Hydro printing. So it's like a bucket of water and you get a bunch of color on the surface and then sort of print into it to get those marbly textures. So I mean, I've sort of been inspired by all those different ways to make these liquidy patterns and marbled techniques.
Mhm.
So
And by the way, the artist I mentioned, Siqueiros, who held the experimental workshop in New York, who influenced Pollock, he used to teach his students a marbleizing technique, with what is it called when like oil and water don't mix kind of thing,
Mhm.
where it separates. I forget the exact materials, but if you look at Siqueiros's workshop artwork, you'll see this marbleizing technique as well. So there's different ways of doing it.
Yeah, a lot of
Now,
those oils are what sort of makes these sort of sell things too, because the one like the black will not have the oil in it and the white will, so it'll push. You swipe the black over everything and then the white like pushes it away. And this is another example with like a black swiped over a rainbow. But you need a little bit of oil in there to do those types of things. The like this and what I have on the floor is I've been doing like 100% Elmer's glue recently. I was just rambling about the effects that oil can have in the paint. Like a little drop of silicone oil in the colors is where you start getting these like cells and stuff. So I was just saying recently I've been working more with just paint and glue and no oil because it picks up more of like the marbled stuff if you're drawing on it with the end of a paintbrush or tilting it around or something. When you have the oil, things start to like move and change on their own until it's done. So
thank you. And we did have a question also about your gallery from Nicholas. Are the price points, I assume either your art or I'm assuming he's talking about the gallery, are the price points for the artwork fairly similar?
I would say for the most part, I mean, it's sort of a discussion with the artist to find out where their price point is at when they're coming into the gallery. So I mean, it's different artists have different price points. So I know like in the holiday show with the 50 different artists, everybody was sort of naming their own price. So it was really like basically a range of like maybe $300 to like $3,000. But I feel like when that always depends on who the artist is and how big the piece is and what it is. So
sometimes artists have a really hard time pricing their work. Any tips that you could give artists?
I think just it's important to have some way of structuring it. So when I think about my pieces, I guess I think about size for the most part, and I try to keep things consistent by size. But that doesn't always work because sometimes you put 40 hours into a 10-inch by 10-inch canvas, and you put 3 hours into a giant canvas. So this is the type of stuff that makes it really difficult to land on a consistent system when the process and what you're doing with each piece is very specific to that piece. So, but it is good to try and have a general scale. And I guess it depends on if you're, selling originals solely or if you're selling prints of originals. So that makes a difference as well. But with my work, I generally think about size. How big is the piece?
Yeah, and a key word that you said, I think, is consistent. That if an artist says this work is $500 in a gallery, then they wouldn't then go to another venue and change the price. Like you need to keep your prices consistent. Otherwise, if somebody bought it, they might be like, oh, wait a minute, he sold it to me for 500. He sold it to her for 300. What's going on here? Right? So good point. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, ideas?
Love ideas. Okay. Should I start like just wandering around the gallery?
Yeah, that would be, yeah, show us the gallery. So the last time I was there, Chris, you didn't have your paintings on the wall.
Yeah, so I've hung some of my work. So I'll start behind the desk. This is one of the big spiral ones.
Go slow. We want to really see this work here. Let's have some fun. Do you mind if we talk a little bit about your piece here? Just
Sure.
keep on there. That's so interesting. Now, I'm going to throw out a question to everybody. When you look at this artwork, what do you see? So you could get some you could get some feedback. What do you actually see? What does this remind you of? Like I see a maze, and it's really interesting. We did this workshop today about optical illusions. It's like the colorful part, first it looks like the background, but then all of a sudden it pops forward. So it's like not clear spatially, it's like ambiguous in a really fun way, almost like a puzzle.
Yeah, I
And
think the zebra stripes in the background sort of just like bring that, like the background is sort of hitting and vibrating with the energy. Like you're trying to focus on the different paint sheet spots, but the background is always sort of like screaming at you.
there you are. Okay, yeah. No, it really is very interesting spatially. So we do have some questions. Someone says, "What's your favorite style?" This a lot of there's a lot of questions, Teresa. What's your favorite style, color, shape, and line?
Uh, Style, loud and colorful. Color, purple. Shape, circle. And line. Probably squiggly. I like a good squiggly line.
Chris, that is so good. I love the way you're not afraid to make paintings that are like loud and you might even say flashy, like, I love that. You're not holding back.
Well, the one good thing I'll say about the paint sheets is you can kind of just like make a bunch of them and then throw them around and stack them on top of each other. So like a lot of the paintings, like say this one behind me, it was just one main sheet that I used, that big purple sheet. But then the one we were just talking about, like that one was after I had a whole pile of sheets and I just started like pulling into the archives. And in here, there's like always at least two that sort of came from the same sheet and match each other. So if you look at it really closely, you can start picking out where the shapes and their partners are.
Mhm.
But
Okay. Well, thank you. I like this tour. So let's continue the tour. This is fun.
I'll go over here. This is the big pink one. I call this one atmosphere because the pearlescence in the background is sort of like the atmosphere around the world. It's got a nice little squiggly, accent piece down there, like an asteroid or something.
Oh,
The next one, this is my treasure planet with the two rings. It was another recent one I did. The background on this one I really like. It's like a very dark black, but it has some subtle blue pearlescence in there that sort of make it shine and offset the blues in the circles. These are my little reflections. So this is a two little 6x6 canvases, sort of more like that other larger composition above the desk. These are a little bit older. So like this one here doesn't have any paint sheets. It's all like the sort of layered up how the background is. I've just painted in the shapes with different textures as well. And then this one was an earlier work. So this is where the outline is done first, and then the wet paint was poured directly into the space. So sort of an idea of where I came from and now where I am now with the larger shapes that are made from the paint sheets. And I saw a question in the chat about the background. I generally do the background first. So like I'll put in the layers, and then when the background's complete, I'll have these open spaces left. And then that'll be now the paint sheet goes on. And then finally the outline is sort of like the finishing touch. This is my little snowflake. So this is 4 little 6x6 canvases, and you can kind of turn them so that there's a different middle. They've got like 4 different ways. If you rotate each one of them, they all match up symmetrically. This was another early one with the paint poured directly into the spaces, black and white paint sheets, and then put that rainbow color in the background. what I like about this piece too is the gold outline. I think it gives it sort of like that gem quality, makes it pop. Like the red one, this is like Mars. This one, this is green lightning when I was working with green earlier. It's got a lot of that green pearlescence in the background as well. And this was one of the first ones I did. I don't know if it shows up on video, but you can see a lot of those subtle oil and water patterns in here. It's like a subtle rainbow. So I wanted to contrast it with a rainbow outline and a rainbow in the bottom circle. And then there was this one as well. Yeah, so I was playing with inverting this composition. So like with this one, the rainbow is sort of in the background space and the shapes are black and white sheets. And this one, we're back to having black and white in the background space. And then instead of sheets, this is actually textured painting like I do in the backgrounds. So just playing around with this spiral composition, my galaxy, I call it. A couple pink pieces. This is another louder composition with more circles and rectangles. This came after this one that we talked about earlier. So trying to just bring more shapes in. This one I think got away from me a little bit. It's not my favorite.
It's beautiful. So how long is this show up, Chris?
So right now it's kind of like in winter mode. So I've just kind of hung some of my works, and this will probably be up until the end of the first week in March. And that's when I'll really start with the show every 3 weeks for the rest of the year, probably end of March and then on from there.
Wow,
Out to
so
December.
you're going to be busy. You're going to be busy.
Yeah.
So let's see if there's any other question. Oh, well, Christine Clark says, how does this media withstand sun and what types of framing is advised? Does it need to breathe or would it emit moisture if enclosed in glass or plastic?
That's a good question. I haven't enclosed it in glass or plastic. I think that it's all like acrylic material, so it should dry to solid plastic. I have noticed it doesn't like moisture. Like I've tried to do some of the outdoor shows and I've brought pieces with me and had them hung in the tent all afternoon, and that it can get really steamy in there. So what I've noticed is sometimes like the thick gel can take a little bit more water back on, but it seems to dry back out. I display my works without frames because I work on stretched canvases and I continue the compositions around the edge of the canvas. So like if you can see here on this one, if I get right up to the edge, it goes around the sides and the bottom. So with my works, I don't necessarily advise framing because it's painted all the way around. So painting the sides is sort of how I frame them. I think if it was fully dry and it wasn't in a situation where it had just been out in a tent, it wouldn't be a problem under glass. It shouldn't be admitting moisture. I mean, unless it got really humid or steamy in there, but to my knowledge, these acrylics and plastics are pretty stable. I mean, they can get like a little softer and everything, but they stay solid.
Thank you. Let's see if we missed it. Another comment. Well, a lot of appreciation. Very interesting. Thank you. And Tabitha says, I really like the backgrounds, the colors, and the textures. Roy says, since he spoke about his interest in outer space, the painting reminds me of the solar system with the circle shapes being planets and the zebra type lines representing motion.
Yeah. So I hadn't thought of that with the zebra lines being motions, but that does make sense. I mean, I sort of think with the spirals, I think the spiral naturally always sort of feels like it's in motion. Like when you look at a galaxy, you can tell stars are moving around and things are swirling towards the center. And so I think with the spirals, I'm I'm going for that same effect. And the zebra lines do help push things in certain directions around the way. So
Mhm.
that's a good comment.
So Claudia says, do you sell your paintings?
I do. Yeah. So I sell them here at the gallery, and I'm working on getting a better website shop together. And I would like to be selling prints of them later this year as well. But right now I just sell the originals.
Okay, good. So that's something we're going to look forward to. And people can visit your Instagram page. You want to
Mhm.
tell us again what it is?
Yeah, so the gallery's Instagram is at the Lucore Art, just the name of the gallery. And then my personal Instagram is just at the Lucore. So the same thing with no art at the end.
Very
So,
good. And someone just put it in the chat. Very good.
yes,
At the
perfect.
Lucore Art.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, so
Yeah.
contact to learn more about the art or the gallery. And let's see if there's any other questions here. Would anyone like to come on and say anything in real, rather than just the chat? Would anyone like to say anything? Is the parent here? Is anybody here who would, a friend who wants to say hello?
I don't think my parents made
I
it.
have a question. The Floetrol, is that what creates those cells, or is that just like a leveling kind of thing? Leveling agent, I guess.
So it's interesting, like Floetrol can create cells, and it often does, but it's like with just from using Floetrol, you won't get like a ton of cells. Like when I'm trying to do specifically the marbled stuff where I don't want cells, I don't use any Floetrol because it will create cells. But if you're trying to go for an effect where it's like all cells, it's not necessarily what Floetrol does. Like you also need a little bit of the silicone oil or some type of oil in your colors to really push things around more. Although the Floetrol, it will sort of create bubbly stuff, but it's like it's not super strong about it. The Floetrol is really good for making things level out very well though, and without having to use too much water. Like if you're using a mix that's fully Elmer's glue and paint with no Floetrol, it can get too thick sometimes, and it won't level out at all, and the things will like stay in the chords where you laid them down, and you might have spaces in there if you're not careful where there's no paint at all, so you'll get holes in your sheet. If you're using Floetrol, it'll make it level naturally, so it'll really sort of push things out into one layer, but it will also start to create bubbles, but like not all the way like it would if you had silicone gel. It's kind of like in the middle type of thing.
Oh, great, thank you. So the Elmer's is basically to have it stick more, did you say, to the plexiglass? Is that
No,
why
the Elmer's is for the paint to stick together like for itself. So like if you were working with just acrylic paint and you tried to peel it up, it'll probably like peel. Like you'll get strips where it'll stick together and it'll just flake apart. The Elmer's glue really is like a plastic, so it'll hold everything together in a sheet. And it'll make it so it's like actually able to be peeled up too. Like it holds it all together, but it's for like holding the actual paint together, not holding it down to the sheet. You don't want to, especially like if you're trying to peel it up, you don't want to use something where it's like textured or anything. When I do these pours, I do it on like a plexiglass or a sheet of like a canvas wrapped in plastic. Or the other great thing is like the whiteboards that they use in classrooms, the dry erase boards, like paint will peel right up off of that. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's a really cool technique. So why wouldn't you just do it all onto the canvas? Because you want to like select a section that you like and put it in the round form, and then
Yeah.
fix it to the canvas?
Yeah. And I like that. I mean, when you're going straight onto the canvas, you can always cover it up, but I feel like you're kind of like really making a commitment to using whatever you're putting down on the canvas. And also the other thing would be, sometimes I would want just I would want to fill in little tiny pieces. So, and it gets like you have a lot more control over what goes into that little tiny piece if you're selecting it from a larger piece than if you're like trying to be really careful going right onto the canvas. The other thing though is like just sort of with how I work in stages. So like some days I'll be making paint sheets, some days I'll be making backgrounds, some days I'll be putting stuff down, but like I can just go in and keep making paint sheets, you know, like even if I'm not sure I'm going to use it for this composition that I have on my table right now, I can make the paint sheet and throw it on the pile in the basement. And then I have the material if I want to pull it out and use it for a composition on a later day. So it's pretty convenient.
Great. It was excellent, beautiful work, and I'll definitely have to come and visit you out there.
Well, please do.
Good luck.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much. So, any
Anyone
other?
Any other closing talks? We have a lot of people really enjoyed the talk. Great talk, lovely gallery, beautiful, thank you. And Elwinda says, this was so lovely, makes me miss the beauty of the area. So much great art. So true.
A good reason to come back. Come visit me.
But go visit. He's out there in Montauk. Go visit. No, I'm just teasing. So do people need to make an appointment right now to come to visit, or do you have regular hours?
Now with it being off season, it's best to give me a call first to make sure I'm here before you drive out to Montauk. I mean, I've been in here sort of irregular for these January and February. For like regular season, I'm in here 10 to 5 every day but Wednesday. So.
Okay. And do you want, if you'd like, you could put your phone number in the chat, or they can contact you through the Instagram, right? What's the best thing, Craig? Whatever you think is appropriate.
Yeah, you can Instagram message me. I just put my phone number in the chat, and I'm also going to put my email. But yeah, feel free to reach out with any questions, or if you want to make an appointment to come see the space, I'll be here.
It's worth it. The work in real life is just, it's so dimensional. It's hard to get that from Zoom. And the area is also a lot of fun, actually. It's spectacularly beautiful to visit Montauk in the winter. It really is breathtakingly beautiful. So now I did, as I mentioned, I connected with Chris's mother. And that's how one of the things that gave me this idea, but also I had known about Christopher's gallery and his art. So I'm so thankful to have him. But I did ask his mother if he was always like involved in the arts and painting since he was a child. So she sent me these photos, and I'd like to share it as we say thank you to Christopher Lucore. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And now this is just a little surprise for Christopher. And I hope he doesn't kill me. But how cute was this kid? Okay. So sometimes, seriously, those early childhood experiences are really so important, whether you're an artist or not. Really allowing children to have the freedom to be creative, to have that joy of playing with paint, having the tactile experience, expressing themselves within a framework that's safe, and really encouraging young people to follow their dreams, and I think Chris is a great example, and I can't get over how cute those pictures are. So happy baby. Happy baby. So thank you so much, Chris. And we're going to stop there. Everybody have a wonderful evening and a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.